I walk into my sister's wedding after 11 years of being branded the ugly grad and completely cut off from my family. The moment everyone sees me, the entire ballroom falls silent, champagne glasses freeze mid-air, and my mother's face drains of all color. They thought I had disappeared forever, defeated and broken after what they did to me. But what they don't know is that the awkward, rejected girl they threw away is now worth $52 million. And I'm about to expose the lies they've built their perfect lives on, starting with my sister's fake medical degree. By the end of this wedding, everything they thought they knew about success, family, and who deserves respect will be turned completely upside down. But before we continue, check if you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? The limestone steps of the Grandview Country Club stretch before me like a staircase to Judgment Day. 11 years ago, I stood on different steps, clutching my college diploma while my family told me I was too ugly to represent the Davis name at public functions. Today, I climb these steps in a custom Armani gown that costs more than my father's monthly salary. My driver closes the Bentley door behind me with a soft click that echoes across the manicured lawn. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I can see the wedding reception in full swing. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over guests in expensive suits and designer dresses, all celebrating my sister Victoria's marriage to Dr. Jonathan Pierce, Atlanta's most eligible cardiac surgeon. The same sister who stood beside my parents 11 years ago and agreed that I was an embarrassment to the family name. My phone buzzes with a text from Marcus, my business partner and closest friend. Last chance to change your mind, Amelia. You sure about this? I type back quickly, they made their choice. Now I'm making mine. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm entering through the front doors this time. No service entrance, no hiding in the kitchen until everyone leaves. Tonight, I'm the guest they never expected to see again. My reflection catches in the polished brass doors as I approach. The awkward 26-year-old with thick glasses and frizzy hair is gone. In her place stands a woman with laser-corrected vision, professionally styled auburn waves, and the kind of confidence that only comes from proving everyone wrong. The doorman's eyes widen slightly as he takes in my appearance, but his training kicks in and he opens the door with a polite nod. Good evening, miss. Good evening, I reply, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. The moment I step into the lobby, conversations pause. Heads turn. Recognition flickers across familiar faces, followed immediately by confusion. This can't be Amelia Davis. Amelia Davis was the ugly duckling who disappeared after college. This woman is polished, successful, beautiful. I move through the crowd like I own the place, which, in a way, I do. The Grandview Country Club's recent renovation was financed through my venture capital firm's investment portfolio. Amelia? The voice belongs to my cousin Sarah, who once told me I'd never find a husband looking the way I did. Her champagne glass trembles in her manicured hand as she takes in my transformation. Hello, Sarah, I reply with a smile that doesn't reach my eyes. You look exactly the same. It's not a compliment. Sarah peaked in high school and has been clinging to those glory days ever since. Her dress is trying too hard, her makeup too heavy, her desperation too obvious. We thought you were. She stammers. Dead? Homeless? Living in shame somewhere? I finish for her. No, just busy building a life worth living. Before she can respond, I move deeper into the reception. The ballroom is decorated in Victoria's signature style, over the top and desperate for attention. White roses everywhere, enough tulle to outfit a ballet company, and gold accents that scream nouveau riche. My parents stand near the head table, my father's arm around my mother's waist as they hold court with other country club members. Dad's gotten grayer, softer around the middle. Mom's had work done, but it's the expensive kind that looks natural unless you know what to look for. They haven't seen me yet. They're too busy basking in the glory of their successful daughter's wedding to the perfect son-in-law. The same daughter who helped them destroy my future, who stood silent while they called me an embarrassment to the family name. A waiter offers me champagne from a silver tray. I accept it, using the moment to scan the room and locate Victoria. My sister, the golden child, the beautiful one, the one who could do no wrong. I find her near the dance floor, radiant in an Oscar de la Renta gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She's laughing at something Dr. Pierce is whispering in her ear, her hand resting on his chest in a gesture of perfect intimacy. She looks happy. Successful. Everything my parents wanted in a daughter. That's about to change. I move closer, timing my approach for maximum impact. Victoria's laugh dies in her throat when she sees me. Her face goes through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, fear, and finally, desperate calculation. Amelia, she breathes, and the name carries across the dance floor like a curse word in church. The music continues, but a bubble of silence forms around us. Victoria's new husband looks between us, confusion creasing his brow. He's handsome in the way that successful doctors usually are, confident, well-groomed, with the kind of smile that sells expensive procedures to wealthy patients. "Victoria, you didn't tell me your sister was coming," Dr. Pierce says, extending his hand toward me with practiced charm. "I'm Jonathan. I've heard so much about you." I accept his handshake, feeling the slight callus on his index finger that comes from years of surgical work. "I'm sure you have. The question is, how much of what you've heard is true?" Victoria's grip tightens on her bouquet. "Amelia, what are you doing here?" "Celebrating your wedding, of course. Isn't that what sisters do?" My parents have spotted me now. I watch my mother's champagne glass slip from her fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor in a sound that cuts through the ambient conversation. My father's face hardens into the same expression he wore 11 years ago when he told me I was no longer welcome in his house. They approach like storm clouds gathering, my mother's social smile fixed in place but her eyes full of panic. Behind them, I can see other family members whispering, pointing, the gossip spreading through the room like wildfire. "Amelia," my mother says when they reach us, her voice pitched perfectly to carry the right notes of surprise and welcome while her eyes promise murder later. "What a wonderful surprise. You look different." "Success tends to change a person," I reply evenly. "Though I suppose you wouldn't know that from experience." The barb hits home. My mother's smile falters for just a moment before she recovers. My father steps forward, his bulk meant to intimidate the same way it did when I was younger and easier to control. "What do you want?" he demands, dropping all pretense of familial warmth. "To toast the happy couple, of course." I raise my champagne glass. "To Victoria and Jonathan. May your marriage be built on the same foundation of honesty and integrity that our family is famous for." Jonathan laughs, missing the sarcasm entirely. "Thank you, that's very kind. Victoria tells me you've been traveling for work?" "Something like that." I meet Victoria's eyes over her husband's shoulder. "I've been building a life based on truth rather than carefully constructed lies." Victoria's face pales beneath her professional makeup. She knows exactly what I'm referring to, and the panic in her eyes tells me she's spent every day of the past 11 years waiting for this moment. "Jonathan," she says quickly, "let's go greet the Hendersons. They just arrived." But Jonathan is a surgeon, trained to notice details, and he's picked up on the tension crackling between us like electricity before a storm. "Actually, I'd love to hear more about what you've been up to, Amelia. Victoria mentioned you dropped out of college?" The lie hangs in the air between us, toxic and familiar. My parents shift uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in their drinks. Victoria's grip on Jonathan's arm tightens to the point where I can see her knuckles going white. "Dropped out?" I repeat, letting confusion color my voice. "That's interesting. I graduated summa cum laude from Georgia Tech with a degree in computer engineering." Perhaps Victoria misspoke? Jonathan's eyebrows rise. "Georgia Tech? That's impressive. I did my undergraduate work there before medical school." "Then you know Professor Williams in the engineering department?" "Of course. He's legendary. Hardest professor on campus. He wrote one of my letters of recommendation." "Lovely man, once you get past his reputation for making students cry." I smile at the memory. He said my senior project was one of the most innovative solutions he'd seen in 20 years of teaching. Victoria's breathing has become shallow. My parents are exchanging the kind of looks that used to precede me being sent to my room without dinner. Jonathan is looking between us with growing interest, his surgeon's mind already beginning to piece together the inconsistencies. "What was your senior project?" Jonathan asks, genuinely curious now. "A patient monitoring system that could predict post-surgical complications 48 hours before they became critical. It reduced mortality rates by 37% in the trial runs at Atlanta General." Jonathan's entire demeanor changes. He straightens, his professional interest fully engaged. "That's remarkable. Are you still working in medical technology?" "Among other things. I run a venture capital firm that specializes in medical innovations. We've funded several breakthrough treatments in the past few years. My mother makes a small choking sound. My father's face has gone red, the way it used to when I would correct him in front of his friends. Victoria looks like she's about to faint. Davis Capital? Jonathan asks suddenly. You're the Davis from Davis Capital? I nod. Guilty as charged. Jonathan stares at me with something approaching awe. Your firm funded the cardiac stent technology we use at Emory. You've saved thousands of lives. 63,412, according to our last quarterly report, I reply. But who's counting? Victoria's hand flies to her throat, a gesture I remember from childhood whenever she was caught in a lie. Jonathan notices the movement and follows her gaze to me, his expression shifting from admiration to confusion. Victoria, why didn't you tell me your sister was the founder of Davis Capital? We tried to get funding from them last year for the new cardiac wing. She. Victoria stumbles over words, her usual grace deserting her entirely. She thought I was dead, I say helpfully. Isn't that right, Victoria? After all, it's easier to tell people your sister disappeared than to explain why you helped destroy her life. My mother steps forward, damage control mode activated. Amelia, you're being dramatic. You know we've always been proud of your accomplishments. Proud? The word comes out sharper than I intended, drawing attention from nearby guests. I lower my voice, but each word carries the weight of 11 years of pain. You called me an embarrassment to the family name. You said I was too ugly to be seen at public functions. You told everyone I was a failure who couldn't handle real responsibility. Jonathan's expression hardens as he looks at my parents, then at his new wife. Is this true? It's complicated, my father says, falling back on his default response for any situation that makes him uncomfortable. It's really not. I turn to address Jonathan directly. 11 years ago, when I graduated college, my parents were more concerned with how I looked in family photos than what I had achieved. They decided I was an embarrassment and cut me off completely. That's not how it happened. Victoria finally finds her voice, but it's shaky, uncertain. Then please, enlighten us. Tell your husband exactly how it happened. Victoria's mouth opens and closes like a fish out of water. The silence stretches until it becomes uncomfortable for everyone within earshot. Other wedding guests have begun to drift closer, sensing drama with the instinct that draws people to car accidents. Jonathan's surgical training kicks in, and I can see him beginning to evaluate the situation with clinical precision. I think we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. Why? I ask innocently. These are all family friends, aren't they? People who knew me when I was growing up. I'm sure they remember the ugly Davis daughter who disappeared after college. A woman in a blue dress steps forward. Mrs. Henderson, one of my mother's bridge partners and the biggest gossip in their social circle. Amelia, dear, you look absolutely stunning. I had no idea you'd become so successful. My mother's smile becomes strained. Mrs. Henderson, how lovely to see you. I was just telling my husband that I couldn't believe this was little Amelia Davis. The transformation is remarkable. And to think, Martha, you always said she'd never amount to anything. The words hang in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. My mother's face goes through several shades of red before settling on a sickly pale. Victoria grabs Jonathan's arm tighter, but he gently extricates himself from her grip. You said what? Jonathan's voice carries the kind of quiet authority that commands operating rooms. Mrs. Henderson, oblivious to the landmine she's just stepped on, continues cheerfully. Oh, you know how Martha worried about Amelia. Always said she was too awkward, too focused on those computer things to ever find her place in society. But look at her now. I read about Davis Capital in Forbes last month. $52 million in assets under management, wasn't it, dear? 58 million as of last quarter, I correct gently. Jonathan turns to stare at Victoria, then at my parents. The surgeon's analytical mind is working now, processing information, connecting dots, reaching conclusions. Let me understand this correctly, he says slowly. Your daughter built a multi-million-dollar company, graduated summa cum laude from one of the most prestigious engineering programs in the country, and has saved thousands of lives through her work. And your response was to cut her off and tell people she was a failure? My father puffs up his chest, trying to regain control of the narrative. You don't understand the whole situation. Then explain it to me, Jonathan says, crossing his arms. I'm listening. The ballroom has gone quiet around us. Even the band seems to sense the tension and has stopped playing. Victoria looks like she wants to disappear into the marble floor. The truth is, I say when no one else speaks, they were ashamed of how I looked. Not what I achieved, not who I was as a person, but how I reflected on them in photographs and at social functions. That's not true, my mother protests, but her voice lacks conviction. Isn't it? Then why don't you tell Jonathan about graduation day? Victoria makes a small sound of protest, but I continue. The words I've held back for 11 years pour out like water through a broken dam. Georgia Tech graduation, May 2013. I finished top of my class, had 3 job offers from Fortune 500 companies, and won the Dean's Award for Innovation. I was 26 years old and ready to change the world. I pause, letting the magnitude of those achievements settle over the listening crowd. I invited my family to the ceremony. Bought them hotel rooms, made dinner reservations at the nicest restaurant in Atlanta, spent my last $200 on a dress I thought would make them proud. My mother's eyes fill with tears, but they're not tears of remorse. They're tears of a woman watching her carefully constructed social facade crumble in public. They came to the ceremony, I continue. Sat in the front row, watched me walk across that stage, heard the dean announce my achievements to 2,000 people. Jonathan is listening intently, his medical training helping him follow the timeline, the causation, the diagnosis of a family's dysfunction. And afterward, he asks quietly. Afterward, my father took me aside and told me that while he was proud of my academic achievements, I was still an embarrassment to the family. My mother suggested I consider cosmetic surgery if I ever wanted to be included in family functions again. The sharp intake of breath comes from Mrs. Henderson, but it could have been any of the dozen guests now hanging on every word. Victoria stood right beside them and agreed that it might be better if I didn't come to family gatherings until I'd worked on myself. Victoria's face crumbles. Amelia, that's not. I was young, I didn't understand. You were 28 years old, Victoria. Old enough to know better. Old enough to stand up for your sister. Old enough to tell our parents they were wrong. Jonathan looks at his new wife with an expression I recognize from medical dramas. It's the look doctors get when they realize the prognosis is worse than they thought. What happened next, he asks me, though I suspect he's already guessed. They left, went back to their hotel, flew home the next morning without saying goodbye. I spent my graduation night alone in my apartment, wondering what I'd done wrong. But you didn't give up, Jonathan observes. It's not a question. No, I didn't give up. I took a job with a tech startup in Silicon Valley, moved across the country, and started over. No family support, no safety net, just determination and the belief that I could prove them wrong. I looked directly at Victoria as I continue. I spent the first 2 years working 18-hour days, living in a studio apartment with 3 roommates, eating ramen noodles and instant coffee. But I was learning, growing, building something. My parents have gone completely silent. They know what's coming next. The startup got bought out by Google in 2015. My stock options were worth $4.2 million overnight. I let that number sink in before continuing. I used that money to start Davis Capital. Mrs. Henderson gasps. Several other guests murmur appreciatively. In their world, success is measured in dollars, and 4.2 million is a language they all understand. Since then, we've funded 47 companies, created over 3,000 jobs, and generated breakthrough medical technologies that have improved healthcare for millions of people. Jonathan nods slowly. Including the cardiac innovations we use at Emory. Among others, we've also funded cancer research, mental health treatment programs, and accessibility technology for disabled patients. I pause, meeting each of my family members' eyes in turn. All while they told everyone who asked that their daughter had dropped out of college and disappeared. That I couldn't handle responsibility. That I was an embarrassment they preferred not to discuss. Victoria finally finds her voice, but it comes out as a whisper. I thought you'd want to put it behind you. Start fresh. By lying about my existence? By protecting you from judgment, my mother says, but the excuse sounds hollow even to her. Jonathan's expression has hardened into something clinical, detached. What kind of judgment were you protecting her from? My father steps forward, trying to regain his authority. You don't understand what it was like. She was socially awkward, unpresentable. We have a reputation to maintain in this community. The honesty of it lands like a physical blow. Even now, even faced with proof of my success, he can't bring himself to admit he was wrong. Jonathan turns to Victoria, and I can see the exact moment when his feelings for her begin to shift. It's subtle, but unmistakable to someone who's learned to read people the way I have. So let me understand this, he says to his new wife. Your sister achieved more by age 27 than most people do in their entire lives, and your family's response was to pretend she didn't exist? Victoria's mouth opens, but no sound comes out. While simultaneously telling me, Jonathan continues, his voice growing colder, that you graduated from medical school at Emory, when I now suspect that might not be entirely accurate either. The color drains from Victoria's face so quickly I'm afraid she might faint. This isn't going according to her plan. Jonathan, we can discuss this later, she says desperately. No, I think we should discuss it now. Because I called Emory's registrar's office last week to get copies of your transcripts for the insurance paperwork. They have no record of a Victoria Davis in any of their medical programs. The silence that follows is so complete I can hear my own heartbeat. Victoria's carefully constructed world is collapsing in real time, and she knows it. That's because I used my maiden name, she stammers. Victoria Davis is your maiden name, Jonathan points out. Unless you're telling me you've been married before and didn't mention it? My mother makes a small sound of distress. My father looks like he wants to disappear into the floor. Mrs. Henderson is practically vibrating with excitement at finding herself at the center of the biggest scandal their social circle has seen in decades. The truth is, I say gently, Victoria never went to medical school. She took some pre-med courses at the local community college but never graduated. She's been working as a receptionist at a dermatology clinic and telling everyone she's a medical professional. Jonathan stares at his new wife with a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. Is this true? Victoria's tears are real now, mascara streaming down her cheeks in black rivulets. I was going to tell you. I wanted you to love me. So you lied to me about your education, your profession, and your family? Jonathan's surgical training kicks in, and his voice becomes clinical, detached. What else have you lied about, Victoria? The question hangs in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Victoria collapses into one of the gold-painted chairs, her expensive wedding dress pooling around her like melted snow. The fight has gone out of her completely. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispers. When we first met, you assumed I was a doctor because I knew medical terminology from working at the clinic. I didn't correct you. Jonathan's hands are steady, surgeon's hands, but I can see the tremor in his jaw that betrays his emotional state. We've been together for 2 years, Victoria. 2 years of building a relationship on lies. My mother attempts damage control. Jonathan, you have to understand, Victoria was protecting herself. She knew you moved in elevated circles, and she wanted to be worthy of you. Worthy? The word explodes from him with surgical precision. She thought lying to me would make her worthy? I watched this unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and pity. This isn't how I imagined my revenge playing out. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I mostly feel tired. Mrs. Henderson leans closer to her husband, whispering furiously. Other guests have formed small clusters, everyone talking at once, the gossip spreading like wildfire through dry grass. There's more, I say quietly, because if we're going to do this, we might as well do it completely. Everyone turns to look at me. Victoria's tear-stained face goes completely white. The clinic where Victoria works? The one she's told everyone she manages? It's been under investigation by the state medical board for the past 6 months. My father takes a step backward as if I've physically pushed him. Insurance fraud, unnecessary procedures, billing for services never rendered. The investigation is ongoing, but the preliminary findings suggest systematic fraud dating back at least 5 years. Jonathan's expression shifts from betrayal to something approaching disgust. Are you involved in insurance fraud? Victoria shakes her head frantically. I just answered phones. I filed some paperwork. I didn't know, she knew, my father interrupts, his voice heavy with defeat. We all knew. The money was too good to turn down. The admission lands like a bomb in the middle of the reception. Several guests gasp audibly. Mrs. Henderson clutches her pearls in a gesture so perfectly cliché it would be funny if it weren't tragic. Jonathan stands perfectly still for a long moment, processing this information with the same methodical approach he probably uses when reviewing patient charts before surgery. Let me make sure I understand the complete picture, Jonathan says, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. My new wife lied about her education, her profession, and her family. She's potentially involved in insurance fraud. And her family has spent 11 years systematically destroying their other daughter's reputation while she built a multi-million-dollar company and saved thousands of lives. He looks around the room, taking in the faces of the wedding guests, the elaborate decorations, the expensive champagne that's now sitting untouched on abandoned tables. Is there anything else I should know before I decide whether to have this marriage annulled? The word annulled hits Victoria like a physical blow. She doubles over as if someone has punched her in the stomach. Jonathan, please, she gasps. I love you. That part was never a lie. Love built on deception isn't love, Victoria. It's manipulation. He turns to face me, and I see something in his expression that surprises me, respect. Amelia, I owe you an apology. Not just for tonight, but for every assumption I made based on lies. Your family should be proud of what you've accomplished, not ashamed of how you look while accomplishing it. Thank you, I say simply. I have a confession to make, Jonathan continues, and now he's addressing the entire room. When I called Emery about Victoria's transcripts, I also did some research on Davis Capital. I wanted to understand what kind of family I was marrying into. My parents exchanged panicked glances. What I found was a company with an impeccable reputation, innovative solutions that have revolutionized medical care, and a founder who's been quietly funding scholarships for underprivileged students pursuing STEM degrees. He pauses, letting that information settle. 43 full scholarships last year alone. Students who might never have had the opportunity for higher education otherwise. All funded anonymously through the Amelia Davis Foundation. I feel heat rise in my cheeks. I've worked hard to keep my charitable giving private, but apparently not hard enough. That's the kind of person you disowned, Jonathan says to my parents. Someone who responds to rejection by helping others achieve what she almost couldn't. The room has gone completely silent except for the soft sound of Victoria's crying. My mother looks like she's aged 10 years in the past hour. My father's face has gone from red to gray, the color of defeat. Jonathan reaches into his jacket and pulls out an envelope. Victoria, I had hoped to give this to you tonight as a wedding gift. He holds up the envelope but doesn't hand it to her. It's a check for $50,000 to pay off your student loans. Except now I discover you don't have any student loans because you never went to medical school. Victoria's crying intensifies. Instead, I think I'll donate this money to the Amelia Davis Foundation. Let it help someone who actually deserves a chance at education. The gesture is so perfectly calculated, so surgically precise in its justice, that I have to admire his style. Mrs. Henderson claps slowly, and others join her until there's scattered applause throughout the room. Not for the wedding, but for Jonathan's decision. I'll be filing for annulment on Monday, Jonathan announces. Fraud is grounds for voiding a marriage contract, and I believe this qualifies. He turns to me one final time. Amelia, I hope you'll consider having dinner with me sometime. Not romantically, he adds quickly, seeing my parents' expressions, but professionally. I think Davis Capital and Emery could do great things together. I'd like that, I reply. Jonathan nods to the room, straightens his tie, and walks out of his own wedding reception with the dignity of someone who's just successfully removed a particularly challenging tumor. The silence he leaves behind is deafening. Victoria looks up at me through her tears, makeup destroyed, wedding dress wrinkled, dreams shattered around her like broken crystal. Are you happy now? She whispers. I consider the question seriously. Am I happy? I'm vindicated, certainly. I've proven my worth in the most public way possible. I've watched my family's lies crumble and their golden child fall from grace. But happy? That's more complicated. I'm satisfied, I tell her honestly. For 11 years, I've carried the weight of your rejection. Tonight, I'm giving it back to you. I finish my champagne and set the glass on a nearby table. Around us, wedding guests are beginning to leave, the party ending in whispers and speculation rather than celebration. Amelia, my mother says, stepping forward with desperate hope in her eyes. Maybe we could talk. Maybe we could try to. No, I say quietly. You had 11 years to try. You chose instead to build your lives on lies about mine. My father clears his throat. You're still our daughter. In biology only. You made it clear 11 years ago that I wasn't the daughter you wanted. Nothing has changed except that now other people know it too. I walk toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor with the sound of finality. At the door, I pause and turn back. Victoria, since your marriage is over, you'll probably need a job. I hear the dermatology clinic is closing due to the fraud investigation. She looks up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Davis Capital is always looking for qualified receptionists. If you're interested in honest work for once, have your resume sent to my office. It's a kindness she doesn't deserve, but it's also a test. Will she take the help I'm offering? Or is her pride too strong to accept charity from the sister she helped destroy? I don't understand, she whispers. I spent 11 years proving I was better than you thought I was. Now you get to spend the rest of your life proving you're better than what you've shown me tonight. I walk out of the Grandview Country Club and into the Georgia evening air. My driver is waiting with the Bentley, but I wave him off. I think I'll walk, I tell him. The night is warm, full of crickets and possibility. Behind me, the country club glows like a lantern against the darkness, full of people trying to process what they've witnessed. Tomorrow, the story will spread through Atlanta's social circles like wildfire. The ugly Davis daughter who became a multimillionaire. The beautiful Davis daughter whose perfect life was built on lies. The wedding that ended in annulment and scandal. But tonight, I just walk. For the first time in 11 years, I'm completely free from the weight of their expectations, their shame, their lies about who I am and what I'm worth. My phone buzzes with notifications, messages from business associates who've seen the news, interview requests from journalists who've heard rumors of the story, investment opportunities from people who suddenly want to be associated with Davis Capital. I ignore them all. Success is sweet, but vindication is sweeter. And tomorrow, I'll start funding scholarships for awkward young women who need someone to believe in them when their families don't. The cycle ends with me.